Hey everybody, what is going on? This is Scott Garber back in the saddle of the Profluent Sports podcast, where we are highlighting founders, investors, and executives across the sports business landscape. Today, we're excited to dive into an international company with my good friend Sam Westberg, the CEO and founder of LaSource Sports. Sam, my man, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, Scott. Doing great. I'm glad to have this conversation. So let's get cracking.
No, I love it, man. I love it. Well, look at there's no shortage of exciting things happening in the sports world, and so often we get narrowed and sort of tunneled into what's going on domestically. I'm excited to learn what's going on, through your lens over there in Paris. But Sam, before we do, let's give the listeners a little background to, your origin story. Where do you come from, and what's been the journey to building up, to LaSource and what you're working on now?
Yep. So I'm Sam. I'm half French, half American, but was born and raised in France. Ultimately, like quite a few people that I know in the industry, I'm a failed athlete, tried to make it. My father was a professional athlete, but I didn't make it. So I said, well, okay, what's going to wake me up in the morning? So I realized pretty fast that was going to be the sports industry. And then, starting to work in the sports industry. And my last internship at school was working for Paris FC, who is now in first division in France, but the second club in Paris. I realized I didn't want to be on the club side of things. And then I started to learn about the whole tech world, startup world. And that excited me. I've always been one to do a million things at the same time. And so the hustle of the sport tech world is really what attracted me to being the CEO of LaSource now.
I love it. And give us a little context on, what exactly are you doing at LaSource? Where did you guys start, and sort of what is the full breadth of where you guys spend your time and attention? And then we'll dive into, to all the fun stuff.
Yeah. Long story short, I've always been on the tech side of things. So I had a first startup, didn't work out. Then we was one of the original members of LiveLike back when it was doing VR, which was an incredible journey. But VR didn't really work as a medium. So we actually decided to sell it. And at that one point, we were pivoting at LiveLike, working more on loyalty, gamification, and engagement now. But I was like, okay, what do I want to do? And then as half French, half American, I saw a lot of American companies coming to Europe and failing at servicing the European market because they were coming with that. And I have the right to say it, I'm half American, right? With, a good understanding of their territory, but not wanting to adapt to the European culture, understanding of the landscape there, how things work. It's a very different industry. The balance of power is very different in our ecosystem here in Europe. And I was like, okay, that is what I'm going to build. I'm going to build the agency that represents what we believe to be the best tech startups to help them penetrate the European market, because we had the understanding, the knowledge of the people. And by doing the exercise of saying, hey, we're going to be that layer that tries to find what we believe to be the best tech startups that are going to service you well and that are going to create value for you. The idea is to try to put a stamp on the technology to say, hey, if it's actually validated by LaSource and presented by LaSource, it means that it has legs and that it will create value for it down the line. And so I'm still a co-founder of LiveLike, and we're in an incredible period right now where everybody's about gamification, loyalty. So it's super exciting. But we also had quite a good journey, like helping building up Greenfly in Europe that has had good traction and that has developed a fair amount of clients. We stopped working with them now, but that was a fun journey. So long story short, we try to help the best tech startups. And as a progress in our journey, we have a whole consulting arm to our business as well, because in the same way that tech startups needed to understand organizations, we realized that the other way around was kind of true as well. And so slowly but surely, people were asking, but can you help us out with this? And that's what we decided to actually build up that whole consulting division, where we're doing a lot of work helping big organizations from Real Madrid to FIFA to Bundesliga in all sorts of different ways. So yeah, and
Super
long story
cool.
short, that's
No, it's really neat. And, as someone who's been building in the sports tech space for over a decade, I think we hear two words: silos and fragmentation, right? And those have sort of always been the Achilles heel domestically in the US, right? And then when you start to go abroad, I think that we see that in other pockets. And, a lot of the conversation now as the asset class matures is how do we start to create a cohesive model where we can leverage shared services, and there needs to be a real continuity between organizations and technology to make sure that we're swimming or rowing the boat in the right direction. Let me ask you this, right? You allude to some of the US technologies that were coming over into Europe. As we watch more capital and innovation get poured into the sport tech ecosystem. Are you watching more companies develop over in Paris and be more native? Are you still watching, US companies try to come in? What's sort of the landscape look like over there?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a mix, right? Like a lot of territories, France actually has done a big effort in trying to push entrepreneurship for companies to grow. So we're actually doing pretty well in France now in terms of like startups. And there are some great examples out there in the sport tech that are like pushing the boundaries of the market. What was really true 6 years ago when we launched LaSource was that a lot of the innovation and the money was coming from the US. The reality is that it is not that unilateral anymore. Like we're helping companies that are coming out of India or of the Middle East because they get Middle East founding, so they actually move over there. There are companies in Europe we're accompanying, so Cambia, Respo Vision, to name two of them. I think that the talent is very much worldwide now. While my personal opinion is that 7, 8 years ago, the Indian skill set wasn't as good. Now we have some of the best talent over there, and we're really building very talented teams out of India. I also think that with the US economy and the amount of effort that US companies have to do in terms of marketing penetration and just the overall cost of life in the US means that there are big opportunities for companies to be innovative out of everywhere in the world versus in the US only. So that kind of monopoly that the US have had 5, 10 years ago doesn't feel true at all anymore.
No, I think I'm nodding my head in agreement. And, we're watching this global game now, right? And it used to just be sport, but now it's sports business as a global game. And we're watching it press the boundaries, right? And, really, look and start to feel like other vertical markets, from true innovation and not just sort of recycling technology and bringing it back to, different constituents within the same ecosystem. Talk to me a little bit about, when we talk about key differences, US to Europe. I'm curious, like when you think about go to market, give us a little education, what's working. And obviously it's not a one size fits all. So maybe what regions are receptive right now? Where are you seeing a lot of traction over in Europe? And how are you guys coming up with those go to market plans?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest difference in balance of powers is in the fact that the leagues in the US are private leagues, and that for the longest while, the leagues in Europe didn't have any power over their product and just sold the rights and lost all the data alongside it and didn't really have a thought process beyond just increasing the price of rights year over year. Now that the glass ceiling has been hit, they are actually now reconsidering different approaches. But that's the biggest difference in kind of balance of powers and the ways to approach it, right? Like it's the European market is much more fragmented. There are a lot more opportunities, but much smaller scale opportunities. Versus in the US, if you tackle your vertical very well and start winning the big leagues, then you can just like keep landing the bigger ones next to you and then grow in that way. So that's very different. I think in terms of the technologies, the US is definitely like it's such a transactional country when you look at it from a European landscape, right? Like everything you buy and sell in the US. In Europe, the approach to sport is more like you play for you spend 200 euros a year or 250 euros a year, you have a full season of subscription to your local football club, right? So the way we approach sports is less transactional. So the innovation is definitely still coming from the US, and then Europe is one step behind. But the innovation type, like the innovation topics are the same between the US and Europe. And now that there are more and more private funds coming from the US investing in European sport, is even more true. It's more looking at a global landscape. And even if we take the example, like move even more towards the Middle East, like the technologies that are working well in the Middle East are the same ones that have slowly but surely won over the US, then Europe, and then moving over. So we're very much looking at a global tech versus regional techs.
Interesting. No, it's really neat to hear that. And again, we just get so close to the fire here in America, and we think it's fragmented on this side. It's always neat to hear sort of how you guys are going after opportunities, over in Europe. I want to go sort of on a sidetrack here, right? And talk a little bit more about the live like VR side of things. It's been a hot topic, around fan engagement, sort of these mixed realities on how we leverage AR and VR. And, Sam, it's not so often that you get to talk to folks that have been building in this space for 5, 6, 7 years. Talk to us about the evolution of that and how you think we leverage VR and AR and some of these other consumption models to evolve the sports tech landscape.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because actually the way the Live Like VR team was built, there was a group that was passionate about sport and there was a group that was passionate about technology. And so back in 2015, it was back in the days where there was the super hype around VR. It was the very start and everybody was incredibly excited. Everybody was
I
saying
had
it
my
was.
Oculus goggles. I was an early adopter.
You're one of the 5 people who bought an Oculus headset.
Yeah.
No, but jokes aside, I mean, it was an incredible journey. We covered some of the biggest events. We covered the Super Bowl. We did the French Open. We did the FIFA World Cup. Like, it was incredible. And everywhere we were going, we were creating this experience where you could pick your position from the venue and everybody would put it on and say, oh, wow, it's incredible. It's the future of sports. But then in the back end on our side, we're seeing, yeah, but people don't come back. They put it once, they take it off, they don't go buy it. There's not enough content for it. Like, the technology is moving too slow. And even recently, right, I was trying some of the Apple Vision. The first thing I did when I tried it with friends, I have a lot of friends still in that ecosystem, and I was putting the headset on and they were like, watch out, you have to put it this way. And I was like, I come from that space. I sold VR for 5 years. And still with the new headset, somebody has to tell me, who is a veteran for the space, how to put the headset on. I was like, that's the issue, right, with headset. And so that's what's interesting, because while we pivoted on the live like side of things, because we saw that social and engagement work very well, the team that were excited about technology were actually acquired by Cosm, who are doing the big in-venue kind of event. And that's incredibly exciting. And so it's like, they're like, the business is a very particular one because there's so much money that you have to put up front. But the ultimate experience and cheering and being with people in front of this wide screen where you feel at venue, like, it's incredibly exciting. And I don't know that they're having a blast over there. And so that was very, very fun, because I think that when you ask somebody to wear something else, or like when the innovation is driven by the fact of selling more hardware, you're going to get bit in the butt. And it's 3D TV and it's VR and it's AR and it's like, everything is like, every time it's painful versus like the in venue and creating new experiences and like getting that feel of, hey, it's a social sport, is a social experience where you wish you could be in places, but you can't, but you still have fans in a certain region that want to watch the match together. Like, I think that is incredible. And somehow what we're doing at Live, like on the digital side of things, is exactly that, is bringing community, is bringing engagement, it's bringing fun, it's bringing loyalty to make experiences for the fans fun on your first screen as well. So on your cell phone, on your laptop, because people want to participate, people want to be heard, people want to watch the sport with their friends. And if you actually have a good experience from one single destination, people embrace it, and like, numbers prove it at this stage.
No, it's so, I mean, you hit on so many key points there, and I think that on ramp, however that looks, right, that initial experience dictates a lot of the long tail of how the consumer will behave, right? And so as we lower the barrier to entry, I think we will start to see groups like Cosm with more of an invitation into it, right? Less of a barrier to entry, and then which will ultimately lead to more intrigue there.
Yeah.
Real quick, on Cosm, we're watching that, continue to grow and scale here in the US. Do you see an appetite or a propensity over in Paris for, unique viewing opportunities like that? Or what's the pulse outside of sort of core sports ownership there?
Yeah, that's one where I'll be honest, this is typically where I feel Cosm is a home run for the US, but probably much harder to penetrate the European landscape, just because it is about that entertainment. It is about that whole massive consumption, right? Going to an event, spending a lot of money on drinks, beverages, food, additional merch ticket. Like, this is where US have nailed it, because they also have the audience for it. Conceptually, for a European, going to a venue, paying $100 to attend an event, and then paying on top of it, it's less monetary, right? Like, most of the people that go to the venues in Europe, they want to come see the content. They come in 15 minutes before the match. They leave 5 minutes after the match. During the whole game, their eyes are on the match. They'll go to the restroom during the halftime. Maybe they'll get a drink if they're on a good day. And maybe if you're a parent, you're going to buy a hot dog or a hamburger for your kid. But you're not going to massively consume, or at least not in the proportion that the U.S. Venues manage to make you consume. So I think that a Cosm one, I'm very curious to see if it works. But I'm just thinking, like, and they're doubling down, right? And I'm completely not in touch, and I'm not following through, but they're launching. I saw they launched in Atlanta. They're in Texas. I would go very heavily down the US route, so that they find the business model where actually there are agreements between the league's broadcasters and them to be able to play content, show revenue lines, to then get a chance to actually make it in Europe.
Yeah, no, it's going to be really interesting, and I feel like we're leading the charge in that consumption model, and we'll see, sort of what translates, and then what just works here. It's going to be very interesting to watch that. Now, Sam, I want to go down the youth sports side of things, right, and sort of get a pulse on what you're hearing from the sports tech ecosystem over in Paris and Europe. There's been a lot of attention on it here in the U.S. with private equity starting to move in, watching more singular sports, singularization within playing sports or specialization, and then we're building products and features around that. With the likes of all these wearables and being able to track athletes. Are you guys seeing that same sort of trend over there on the youth side, or what has that been like, from the builder's lens, the lens of the sports tech innovator there?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a big market, and that, one of the things where AI is going to have a massive impact and already started having a massive impact is on the capability of capturing video and data to be able to use it. One of the jokes in France is that every parent has a Kylian Mbappe project where they want to make their son a superstar that trains, that runs faster, that is just incredible, that just like has specialized training from very early stages to become, the star that he is. It is because kids want video, kids are used to data, they want it. Us as parents, we're more and more remote, we're more and more consuming videos, right? I was talking about it. My brother played in Atlanta United for the last 2 years, and his son started playing for the youth teams over there.
Yep.
I had a kick out of seeing the VO or whatever huddle, like video highlights. And it was just like, quality was horrible, etc. But I could see the match. I could see my nephew evolve. I could see like him improve, and I would have paid for that, right? And so I think we're no longer in a phase where it's like, oh, it's going to be expensive hardware. I think there are tons of models leveraging automated technology that doesn't have to be 52 camera video production like on special events around sports. You just want the video, right?
Absolutely.
So that's interesting. And same thing with the data, right? You want to improve, you want to measure. We measure our sleep, we measure our sports performance. Same thing with the kids. So I think whether it's for leisure, whether it's for performance, we all have a reason to like consume more. And I think that there are huge opportunities around those technologies. And I think it's still something where it feels like in the US, every youth club now has video infrastructure and some sort of like wearables. Not the case at all in Europe. And I still think that there's a market for it. And me, again, as a father, if I have to travel for work and I can get the video of my son playing his game on Saturday morning when I'm not around, I would pay for it. And I'm sure there's a lot of parents, because I can see them, all the crazy parents next to me watching the matches, they'd be willing to pay as well.
Well, it's interesting. Like on this side, we're watching an evolution of infrastructure in the U.S., and you start to see more of the academy model become more prevalent, which, we lend from or borrow from, the European model of building sport. And then you look at what we've been able to do here is really build fast and wide on the technology side. And I think that's where that gap is, where we can plug in to existing infrastructure, in Europe. So it's going to be really cool to watch those sort of slam together, and figure out how we find continuity and ultimately grow the global landscape of athletes, in this very competitive space right now. Sam, let me ask you this, right? The space has changed so much. You've mentioned, EU capital coming in. You mentioned, Middle East capital coming in. How do you continue from a LaSource lens to find new and innovative technologies that are truly changing the game that you guys can put your stamp on? Like, where do you guys sort of go through the vetting process? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that was one of the big things, right? The co-founding team at LaSource is made of myself, who I have a tech background, sport tech background. My first co-founder was a system integrator, so really the aggregation of all the technologies, etc. The third person that joined us was actually the person that we met through the UEFA innovation program that made us come up with the idea of LaSource. He was the head of innovation over there. And so he's built that network of relationships where they just pass on their, the innovative techs that are relevant for us to chat with between, in his background at UEFA, he was talking to NBA Launchpad and then Australian Open innovation programs and all that. So it's at the end of the day, it's a small world. And I think the other thing that speaks in our favor is that the technologies that we've helped have done actually pretty well, right? Greenfly penetrated the European market quite well. LiveLike is doing very well in the European market. We're now helping Chem AI and Restful Vision in different ways. Like, we have a track record of helping organizations grow, but also doing it in the right way where on the other side, the organizations who actually purchase those services were happy on their side as well, which is also super important. So we find the right balance between having people meet, right? Not having one win the negotiation, but having people meet where their interests like connect and then where everybody wins out of it. So we have that like kind of in Europe, we built a little brand at this stage for ourselves where it's working quite well to the point where we're moving from like 5 people a year ago or 2 years ago to now like 15 people. Like we're progressing in that journey and people, we're pretty well identified now for people to reach out to us if they want help in growing in the European market.
No, that's so cool. It's so cool. And to be able to create that brand and truly come at it, Sam, from a team of technology forward, right? And technology first. I think sometimes we let the rights or we let the media dictate a lot of the conversation, but to truly understand how these systems talk, for so long we would watch people build these incredible features or product suites, but they don't communicate with the mothership that the clubs are using, right? And so there just becomes this massive gap. And it's really neat to be able to watch and understand those two worlds come together with harmony.
Yeah.
Sam, let me ask you this. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it's a funny thing. Right? The innovations that make most noise are the wow effect technologies, but very often you look at them and you're like, where's the business model behind it, right? Like it's super cool, but how are you going to make money out of it, right? And so we try to categorize it in three ways. There's the wow effect technologies, the one that make you reduce costs, and the ones that make you increase your top line. Right, we focus on those two latter ones because wow technology, we did it for live, like it was great, it was fun, but at the end of the day, you were just like going from one contract to the other without building something in the long run. And we want to help organizations build value around tech versus just like marketing activations.
Well, especially with the way the money's flowing now, right? Like, I mean, it's no longer, the wow effect rolls off pretty quickly. And now what are you, a profitable business, right? Are you able to actually scale and not just continue to play the venture game? And so that's really cool to hear. And I think it sort of dovetails nicely into like, as you continue to lead LaSource and drive innovation, what are personal ambitions for you? Like, what does success look like as you continue to build this rocket ship and participate and shape the sports tech market?
It's a funny one because I've had a chance to think about it because we've been hiring a lot, and every time like, where do you see live like in 5 years? Like, what are the ambitions? LaSource, sorry, in this scenario.
Yeah.
And for LaSource, what I always say is like, I just want everybody to be happy, to have a good atmosphere, and keep delivering at high quality. I don't want to be, like through my startup background, like there is the pressure of the VCs and like bringing in the money, and that's why people pay us, pretty good money. But as LaSource, as an agency, I'm just like, I don't want to be pressured by the industry. It doesn't have to be that we increase our margins to make it 40% margins to attract everyone. Let's keep our 25% margins instead of 30 and deliver great work and have great brand reputation. Because honestly, it's not so much about us going out there to win business as much as people coming our way. And I think that is such a comfortable position. So as long as I feel like the team is comfortable, happy, delivering well, right? It's not a whole Google kind of mindset and like, no, like I want people that are ambitious, that like to work, that like achieving stuff, but I want to empower people because they are motivated and excited. But meanwhile, doing it in a way where we're not trying to sell before we can deliver or investing money that puts pressure that is counter profitable for the decision making that we're going to take at LaSource. So as long as that we have that good dynamic where people still have a good opinion on our brand and that people are happy internally, I couldn't care less whether we become 50 or 20 in 3 years. That brand reputation and that stability is the most important to me.
Listen, it's so refreshing to hear that, right? I think that with that mentality and leadership style, Sam, it allows innovation to manifest and foster in the right way, but it also creates continuity. And I think that's what I'm picking up. There's a real community feel to everything that you guys are building. Not just how do we impact the extrinsic, but how do we put, a community around the builders, right? And make sure that, as like you stamp it as a LaSource, branded company through your agency, that actually means something. And now you can find ways to work together, which is sort of in the underbelly of what we're doing here at Profluent. So it's just really neat to hear that sentiment echoed across the world. Sam, personal question as we turn the corner and bring this home, there's a lot of change happening in sports and it feels like daily. Where do you go to stay up to date with updates, news? Like what are your sources? Where do you sort of keep your finger to the pulse?
That is a very good question. To be honest, the sharing is caring Slack channels of Live Like and LaSource that actually give me the most information, just because we're a group of people super motivated about the industry and that are keen on sharing. So I get most of my information from there. I actually don't get it from an official sports tech expertise media. Which is also like not something I would recommend. I can't wait for the time where for the period where we're structured enough and stable enough where I'm back to being able to doing my own research versus expecting other people to deliver the information to me.
I love that. I love that. Spoken like a true founder right there, you know? There's all those bright, shiny objects, but you got to keep your head down and keep the priority the priority. Sam, what an incredible conversation. As we continue to grow, the membership and the association continues to establish itself. If people want to get in touch with you, if they're looking to expand their product suite over and can take advantage of LaSource, what's the best way to get in touch with you or the team?
I mean, the easiest way, my email address, samuel@lasource.io. We try to reply to everything. We've reached that point where it's not always possible, but we do try to. Or on LinkedIn, very, very available on LinkedIn as well. So always keen on exchanging, participating if there are things to do together. Always excited to have like a lean forward kind of mentality. And if there isn't, that's just cool to connect with people from the industry.
I love it, man. Well, from Profluence, thank you for what you're doing for the industry. Excited to continue to find ways to bring our ships closer together. And, we're both believers that it starts with good people and then you can build the rest of it from there. So sincere thank you. And, look forward to doing this again soon and following all your success.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Thanks for having me, for the interest, and definitely happy to be in touch in the future.
Sounds good. Have a great one, everybody. Talk soon.